The reason that I want you to write it down
I want you to write it
is
down
because
is because
writing it
writing
down
it
is part of the process of changing that. If it's a thing that you don't want to believe, like a sentence that you don't want to believe, it's the process of changing that. And it's the process that you'll need to go through in order to create something new, is you need to write it down. So I resisted this in the beginning, that I didn't want to write it down, because for me, and I don't know if this is for you, Ruth, you can chime in on this if you want. But for me, if I wrote it down, then two things might happen. One, somebody else might read it, and maybe
it
I don't want someone to know whatever it is that
whatever it
I
is that I
thought about myself, right? Because I was ashamed of how I thought about myself. So I didn't want someone else to read it. And then two, if I wrote it down, then it would actually be true. Those were the two things that I was afraid of when I first started going through coach training and learning about figuring out what's going on in my head. So, Ruth, what do you think about writing down the thoughts that you have about yourself on paper?
I'm actually a fan of it. I didn't realize that I always did it. Was probably one of the main reasons I stayed sane, is because I would journal, right? And I just thought I was like, a teenager or, a college student. I was just journaling because that's what you do. Like in my religion, we really, really encourage journaling. But then when I got into college, then just psychologically they encouraged it. But when I stopped journaling when I had kids, it was one of the pieces to when I fell apart. And I think part of that is I didn't have that accountability to my thoughts. But that was also one of my other thoughts that I had was, I don't have time for this. I don't have time to like sit and like think about my thoughts. Like, what a selfish little teenage thing to do. But what it is, when you write it down, you see it.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's accountability. Like, that's scary to think that way. Or like, that's cool. I didn't think of it that way. So I'm a big fan of it, even though I haven't always done it. And even still, like, I used to be in the habit every day. And then, baby number probably 1.5 came along and I got out of the habit. But I could probably say that's one of the correlations of when I started to go downhill, is when I no longer had that ritual of like checking in with myself. And I always thought that it was like I was recording it for my posterity. So I would say I journaled differently then than I do now, because, and that's probably one of the reasons why I stopped journaling, is because I didn't want, like, I wasn't worried about my husband reading it or like my sister reading it, because they were, not around, but I was worried about how my posterity would judge me or see me like, oh my gosh, mom is such a whiner. Mom can't get her crap together. So that's probably one of the reasons why I put it away. But now I do it differently, where I don't keep it. I throw it away. But I still have accountability for my thoughts. So I think it's huge, even though I am not great at doing it all the time anymore.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that it is 100% accountability to ourselves about what we're thinking, because our thoughts are our business. Like, we are in complete control of our thoughts. Now, I'm talking about someone who is not on medication for mental illness, where you have things happening in your brain that you can't control. So if that's your situation, then please, please, please talk to your therapist and your doctor and get the help that you need for that. I am 100% on board with psychotherapy and medications and all of that to help us keep control of what's going on in our brains. But there again, that is your responsibility to go to the doctor and seek help. If you have stuff going on in your mind that is scary to you, then it is your responsibility to seek help. So I just want to put that caveat in there. So for those of us who who are trying to grow our, capacity to create awesomeness, right? To create great things in the world, whether it's in our families. Well, and most of it, that's the reason that we're doing it, is to benefit our families, right? It is a really good idea to write down your thoughts, the thoughts that you have. just on a daily basis. And what that looks like for me is I just sit down and I just start writing what I'm thinking. Like just start writing whatever it is that is in my head. And it evolves into what is, bugging me in my mind. Like what is the deep kind of subconscious stuff that I'm not super aware of will come out as I start writing down the things that I'm aware of.